The setting sun stretched its warm hues across the tranquil streets of Oakbrook, a quiet suburb nestled on the edge of Chicago. As daylight slipped into twilight, a scruffy silhouette emerged from the alley behind Maple Street's charming bungalows. It was Chubby, an aging golden retriever mix with a grizzled muzzle and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. His steps were slow but purposeful, each pawfall a testament to years of wear. Once cherished as a loyal family companion, Chubby now wandered alone after losing his elderly owner. He had become a familiar figure in Oakbrook, a gentle wanderer who had touched the hearts of the neighborhood. Though residents had tried many times to take him to a shelter, Chubby always managed to elude capture, preferring the open skies and quiet streets over the confines of a kennel. On his nightly stroll, Chubby stopped at the corner of Elm and Fourth, where Mrs. Layla, a warm-hearted widow, faithfully left a bowl of fresh water and some kibble on her porch. The old dog drank deeply, his tail wagging gently in gratitude for the small gesture of care. "There you are, you clever old dog," Mrs. Layla called out from her window, her voice filled with affection. "Stay safe tonight, you hear?" Chubby lifted his head, his soulful eyes meeting Mrs. Layla's gaze as if he truly grasped her words. He let out a soft bark in reply before padding off again, his sensitive nose catching enticing aromas of dinners being prepared in nearby houses. As he neared Stoke Brook Community Park, a faint, unusual sound made his ears perk up. He paused, his head tilting as he tried to pinpoint the source. It was a high-pitched, plaintive cry that stirred something deep in his instincts, compelling him to investigate. Veering from his usual route, Chubby followed the sound into the park, his steps quickening as the cries grew louder. They led him to a cluster of trash cans near the playground. Sniffing the air intently, he circled the bins, searching for the source of the distress. When he reached the last can, Chubby stood on his hind legs, peering inside. What he saw made his heart thump. Amidst a pile of crumpled papers and greasy fast food wrappers lay a tiny, writhing figure, a newborn baby, only a few days old. Swaddled in a thin, tattered blanket, the infant's face was scrunched in discomfort as it let out weak, desperate cries. For a moment, Chubby stood still, his body tense as he processed the enormity of what lay before him. But instinct soon took over. A primal urge to protect and nurture guiding his actions. Moving with deliberate care, he grasped the edge of the blanket in his teeth, lifting the baby out of the trash with the precision and tenderness of a mother carrying her young. The infant's cries softened as it felt the warmth of Chubby's fur, the trembling bundle instinctively seeking comfort in its unexpected rescuer. Chubby could sense the urgency. This tiny human was cold and fragile, and its weak cries hinted at the pressing need for help. Determination surged through him as he trotted out of the park, his mind searching for an answer. Where could he take the baby? Who could help? Then a memory surfaced, a kind face etched in his thoughts. Sophia, the retired nurse who lived in the blue house on Sycamore Street. Chubby had often watched her care for wounded birds and stray cats with a gentle, practiced hand. If anyone could save this baby, it was her. With a newfound purpose, Chubby quickened his pace, his movements careful to keep the infant secure. The streets were quiet under the deepening night, but the few who caught sight of him reacted with astonishment. A teenage cyclist swerved wildly, nearly colliding with a lamppost, his jaw dropping at the sight of an old dog carrying what looked like a baby. Others paused, their shocked whispers trailing behind Chubby as he continued his determined journey. When he turned onto Sycamore Street, Chubby spotted Sophia's porch light, glowing warmly in the distance. A beacon of hope. His legs burned with effort, unused to such speed and exertion, but he refused to slow down. The baby's life depended on him now. Each step drove him forward, filling him with a deep sense of purpose. Chubby might have been an aging, forgotten stray, but at this moment, he was a hero. a guardian protecting a life more fragile than his own. As Chubby neared Sophia's house, he spotted her silhouette, framed by the warm glow of her living room window. She was seated in her armchair, engrossed in a book, enjoying the quiet of the evening. Gathering the last reserves of his strength, Chubby climbed the 3 steps to her porch, his legs trembling under the weight of his effort and exhaustion. With great care, he placed the baby on the welcome mat, ensuring the blanket remained snug around its tiny frame. Then, summoning a voice he hadn't used in years, Chubby let out a series of loud, urgent barks. Inside, Sophia jolted upright at the sound, her attention snapping away from her book. Chubby barked again, his tone insistent, silently pleading for her to hurry. The baby stirred weakly, emitting a faint cry as the sound of Sophia's approaching footsteps echoed through the house. Chubby stepped back, his heart racing. He had done everything he could. Now it was up to Sophia. The porch light flickered on, and the door creaked open. Sophia's eyes widened as she took in the scene. At first, she saw only Chubby, the old stray she had often admired from a distance. But then her gaze dropped to the bundle at his feet, and she froze, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, my goodness," she whispered, sinking to her knees. Her trembling hands reached for the blanket, her years of nursing experience immediately taking over. As she unwrapped the bundle, the pale, cold face of the infant came into view, its shallow breaths barely audible. "You poor, precious thing," Sophia murmured, cradling the baby gently against her chest to share her warmth. Chubby let out a low whine, his tail wagging slowly in relief. Sophia glanced at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "You incredible boy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've saved this child's life." Without hesitation, Sophia rushed inside, holding the baby close, and Chubby followed, unwilling to leave his newfound responsibility. Under the bright light of her living room, Sophia's skilled hands worked quickly. She assessed the baby's condition, noting its dangerously low body temperature and labored breathing. Chubby sat nearby, his watchful eyes following her every move, a quiet protector ensuring the baby was safe. "Stay strong, little one," Sophia whispered, her thoughts drifting to the countless hours she had spent in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU. Though it had been years since she'd tended to a newborn, the instincts and skills she'd honed over 3 decades came rushing back. As she worked to warm the fragile infant, vivid memories of her nursing career at Chicago Memorial Hospital surfaced. For 30 years, Sophia had been a source of strength for families, nurturing premature babies, reassuring anxious parents, and celebrating the tiny victories that defined life in the NICU. But since retiring, she had struggled with a deep sense of purposelessness, feeling as though her vast experience and compassionate nature were now being squandered. Wrapping the infant in layers of warm towels, Sophia gently massaged its delicate limbs, her hands moving with practiced care. A surge of determination replaced the emptiness she had been carrying. With her free hand, she quickly grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Emergency services, what's the nature of your emergency?" came the calm, professional voice on the line. "This is Sophia Dean at 1542 Sycamore Street," she responded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "I've found a newborn, likely just a few days old, and it's suffering from hypothermia. I need an ambulance immediately." As she provided crucial details to the dispatcher, Sophia remained focused on the infant. Gradually, its pale complexion gave way to a healthier hue, and its faint cries became louder and more robust. Nearby, Chubby sat vigilantly, his concerned eyes locked on the baby. Occasionally, he let out a low whine, almost as if encouraging the child to fight. In no time, the shrill sound of sirens echoed through the neighborhood. 2 paramedics, a younger woman named Penelope and her seasoned partner Luis, rushed into the house. "Over here!" Sophia called out, still holding the baby close. The paramedics scanned the room, their eyes moving from Sophia to the infant and then to Chubby, piecing together the extraordinary situation. "Can you explain what happened, ma'am?" Penelope asked, kneeling beside Sophia and pulling supplies from her medical bag. Sophia recounted the incredible events, describing Chubby's heroic discovery of the infant. As she spoke, the paramedics' expressions shifted from professional concern to awe. "In all my years doing this job," Luis said, shaking his head in amazement, "I've never seen anything like it. That dog is nothing short of a hero." As Penelope prepared the infant for transport, Sophia felt an unexpected pang of hesitation. She couldn't bear the thought of letting go of the tiny life she had just saved. "I worked in the NICU for over 30 years, she blurted out, her voice tinged with both urgency and hope. "Would it be possible for me to come with you to the hospital?" The paramedics exchanged a brief look before Luis nodded. "Given your background, your help could make a difference," he said. As they moved toward the ambulance, Chubby trotted behind them, clearly unwilling to be left behind. "We can't leave him," Sophia exclaimed, her tone leaving no room for argument. "He's the reason this baby is alive. He deserves to see this through." Despite strict protocol, the paramedics, touched by the unusual situation, agreed. Chubby was helped into the ambulance, where he settled with his head resting on Sophia's lap. She cradled the infant protectively as the vehicle raced toward Chicago Memorial, her old workplace. At the hospital, the ambulance doors opened to reveal an unusual sight. 2 paramedics, an elderly woman clutching a baby, and a dog. Standing in the bay was Dr. Carlos Brown, the pediatrician on call. His expression shifted from confusion to surprise as he recognized Sophia. "Sophia Dean," he asked, his eyebrows lifting. "What on earth?" "This baby needs immediate care," Sophia interrupted, her voice firm and familiar. "And wait until you hear how this little one got here." As they rushed into the emergency room, Sophia explained the incredible series of events. Dr. Brown listened intently, his face growing pale as he examined the infant. "If that dog hadn't found this baby when he did..." He didn't finish the sentence, the implication clear. Inside the bustling ER, Sophia instinctively slipped back into her role as a nurse. She offered advice, assisted where she could, and provided comfort to the baby with the expertise of someone who had spent a lifetime in this environment. At first, Dr. Brown seemed uncertain about the unconventional presence of a retired nurse and a dog. But as the hours wore on, his skepticism gave way to gratitude. Sophia's skills proved invaluable, and Chubby's quiet companionship even seemed to ease the tension in the room. As dawn broke over the city, Sophia sat in a chair, exhaustion etched across her face. Chubby lay at her feet, his head resting on her shoes. Dr. Brown approached, his expression a mix of relief and admiration. "Sophia," Dr. Brown began, his tone serious but compassionate, "the baby has been stabilized, but we've uncovered something concerning, a rare congenital condition. This little one will need ongoing specialized care." Sophia's heart sank. After all the baby had endured, now there was this? She glanced at Chubby, whose steadfast eyes seemed to reassure her. At that moment, a sense of resolve welled up within her. "I'm staying," she announced firmly. "This baby will need every bit of help it can get, and I may be retired, but that doesn't mean I've stopped being a nurse." A smile broke across Dr. Brown's face, his respect for her evident. "I was hoping you'd say that. We could use your experience, especially with a case like this." As the first light of day spilled through the hospital windows, warming the sterile hallways with a golden hue, Sophia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She looked at Chubby, sitting faithfully by her side, and then at the fragile infant in the NICU. The fight was far from over. This was just the beginning of an uphill journey. But with Chubby's extraordinary courage and her rekindled passion for caregiving, Sophia was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. What she didn't realize was that the journey would bring surprises no one could have foreseen. As the morning sun climbed higher, the pediatric wing of Chicago Memorial buzzed with energy. Word of the baby's miraculous rescue, thanks to a stray dog, had spread throughout the hospital, touching everyone who heard it. Nurses, doctors, and even patients began referring to the infant as Baby Lucky. At the center of this incredible story stood Sophia, Chubby, and the tiny fighter in the NICU. Down the hallway, Detective Lee Chen of the Chicago PD moved with quiet determination. Tasked with uncovering the truth behind Baby Lucky's abandonment, her sharp eyes absorbed every detail around her. As she neared the NICU, she spotted Sophia dozing in a chair outside the unit, Chubby stretched out at her feet like a devoted sentinel. "Mrs. Dean," Detective Chen said gently, her voice low enough not to startle. Sophia stirred, blinking herself awake and orienting to her surroundings. "Detective," she murmured, sitting upright. "Do you have any updates? Any news at all?" Detective Chen shook her head apologetically. "Not yet, unfortunately, but I wanted to keep you updated and ask a few more questions." As they spoke, Chen couldn't help but notice the depth of Sophia's dedication and Chubby's unshakable loyalty. It was clear that the bond between them was something extraordinary, forged in the midst of crisis. "We've issued alerts about Baby Lucky and are combing through surveillance footage from the park where the infant was found," Chen explained. "But I have to be honest. Cases like this can be tough. Leads don't always surface quickly, and sometimes they don't surface at all." Sophia nodded thoughtfully, her hand moving to gently stroke Chubby's head. "I understand," she said, her voice steady but resolute. "But we can't give up. This little one deserves to know the truth about where they came from." Before Chen could respond, a loud commotion echoed down the hallway. A stern-looking man in a crisp suit was arguing with a nurse, his voice rising sharply. "I don't care about your policies. That dog is a stray and a potential health hazard. It needs to be removed and taken to a shelter immediately." Sophia's expression darkened, and she rose to her feet. "Excuse me, detective," she said, her voice calm but laced with determination. Chubby followed her closely as she marched toward the heated exchange. As they drew near, Sophia recognized the man, Paul Jones, the head of the local animal control department. She'd crossed paths with him before in her efforts to protect the community's strays, and their interactions had never been pleasant. "Mr. Jones," Sophia said sharply, interrupting the argument, "Chubby is not just some stray. He's a hero, a dog who saved a baby's life. He has every right to be here." Jones turned to face her, his jaw tightening as his gaze fell on her and Chubby. "Mrs. Dean," he said curtly, "I might have known you'd be involved. Hero or not, regulations are regulations. That dog needs to come with me." Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Dr. Brown appeared, drawn by the escalating situation. His calm but authoritative presence immediately demanded attention. "What's going on here?" he asked, glancing between Sophia, Chubby, and Jones. As the details of the situation unfolded, Dr. Brown appeared deep in thought. "Mr. Jones, I see why you're concerned, but Chubby has been a tremendous source of comfort for Baby Lucky. Actually," he paused, an idea taking shape, "what if we formally designate Chubby as a therapy dog in training?" Sophia's face lit up at the proposal, but Jones frowned, his skepticism evident. "That's not how these things work. There are protocols, certifications." Dr. Brown interrupted calmly. "We're prepared to expedite the process, given the exceptional circumstances. I'm confident we can navigate the requirements. For now, I'll personally take responsibility for Chubby staying here." Jones looked flustered, clearly displeased, but unable to counter the doctor's authority. "Fine," he muttered reluctantly, "but I'll be keeping a close eye on this situation." With a sharp glance at Chubby, he turned and stormed off. As the tension eased, Sophia turned to Dr. Brown with gratitude. "Carlos, thank you. I can't imagine what we'd do if Chubby had to leave." Dr. Brown smiled warmly, though his expression turned serious. "It's the least I can do. But Sophia, we need to discuss baby Lucky's condition. It's more complex than we initially thought." In the NICU, Dr. Brown brought up baby Lucky's latest test results on a screen. Lucky has a condition called tetralogy of Fallot with pulmonary atresia. It's a severe congenital heart defect that will require highly specialized surgery. Sophia inhaled sharply, her professional experience underscoring the gravity of the situation. "Carlos, how serious is it? What are her chances?" Dr. Brown sighed, running a hand through his hair, a clear sign of his worry. "It's a high-risk procedure, especially for a baby this small, but it's the only way forward." As they delved into the complexities of the surgery, Sophia noticed a flicker of unease on Dr. Brown's face. "Carlos, there's something you're not telling me. What is it?" she asked gently. Dr. Brown exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging. "Sophia, I've only ever performed this surgery once before, back during my residency. The baby didn't survive. Since then, I've steered clear of pediatric cardiology whenever I could." Sophia reached over and squeezed his arm, her voice firm but kind. "Carlos, that was a long time ago. You've grown so much as a doctor since then. If anyone can give Lucky a fighting chance, it's you." Before Carlos could respond, a nurse burst into the room, looking anxious. "Dr. Brown, Mrs. Dean, there's a couple in the waiting area claiming to be baby Lucky's parents." Sharing a look of surprise, Sophia and Dr. Brown quickly made their way to the waiting room, Chubby following close behind. Upon arrival, they found Detective Chen engaged in conversation with a young couple. The pair appeared nervous, but their eagerness was unmistakable. "Mr. and Mrs. Elettra," Detective Chen said, gesturing toward Sophia and Dr. Brown as they approached. "These are Mrs. Dean and Dr. Brown. They've been taking care of the baby." The woman stepped forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "How is she? Is our baby okay?" she asked in a trembling voice. Sophia's emotions churned. Relief washed over her at the thought that Lucky's parents might finally be here, but an underlying feeling of doubt gnawed at her. Something about their demeanor seemed off. Their movements were stiff, their tone overly polished, as though rehearsing rather than pleading. As Detective Chen began probing them about the baby and the circumstances surrounding her abandonment, Sophia studied the couple intently. Their responses were oddly mechanical, lacking the raw emotion she would have expected from truly distraught parents. Chubby, who had been quietly observing the interaction, suddenly let out a low, menacing growl. His gaze locked on the couple. The man recoiled slightly, his face tightening with irritation. "Keep that filthy dog away from us," he snapped. Detective Chen's expression hardened as he picked up on the man's reaction. "Is there a problem, Mr. Elettra?" he asked, his tone calm but edged with suspicion. As Detective Chen's questioning grew more pointed, the holes in the couple's story became glaringly obvious. Their nervous attempts to stick to their fabricated tale faltered under Chen's relentless interrogation, Sophia's sharp scrutiny, and Chubby's unyielding gaze. Finally, the pressure proved too much. The woman broke down, her voice trembling as she cried out, "Okay, fine. We're not her parents. We just heard about the reward. We thought if we claimed her, we could—" Chen interrupted, her tone icy with authority. "You're under arrest for attempted fraud and obstructing a police investigation." Officers moved in swiftly to take the couple away, their protests drowned out by the finality of the moment. Sophia felt a mix of relief and sadness as she processed what had just unfolded. She looked down at Chubby, who had visibly relaxed now that the charade was over. Stroking his head, she whispered, "Good boy. You knew all along, didn't you?" Dr. Brown, who had silently observed the drama, shook his head in disbelief. "I can't wrap my head around how people could exploit a situation like this." Sophia sighed, her voice tinged with melancholy. "People have a way of surprising you, Carlos, for better or for worse." Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp beep of Dr. Brown's pager. Glancing at the screen, his expression turned grave. "It's baby Lucky," he said, his voice taut with urgency. "Her condition is worsening. We have to operate immediately." Sophia's chest tightened as they raced back to the NICU. The medical team sprang into action, prepping for emergency surgery with practiced efficiency. Standing just outside the chaos, Sophia closed her eyes, murmuring a quiet prayer. "Stay strong, little one. You've come so far. Don't give up now." As the surgical team wheeled baby Lucky into the operating room led by Dr. Brown, Sophia watched anxiously. Chubby stayed close by her side, his presence a steady comfort. When the doors swung shut behind the team, she felt a wave of helplessness, but steeled herself for the long wait ahead. The hours dragged on like days. Sophia remained in the corridor, her hand resting on Chubby's head as they both stayed fixed on the OR doors. Chubby, unwavering, seemed almost as if he were standing guard. Nurses and doctors moved in and out, their faces set with focus, offering no indication of the surgery's progress. Each time the doors opened, Sophia's heart jumped, only to sink again when no news came. The evening stretched into night, the sky outside fading to a deep, velvety blue. Finally, just as the silence in the corridor grew unbearable, the doors opened one last time. Dr. Brown emerged, his surgical cap in hand, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Sophia stood, her legs unsteady after hours of sitting, and looked at Dr. Brown. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Carlos?" Dr. Brown met her gaze, his expression unreadable for a moment that felt like eternity. Then his face broke into a tired but genuine smile. "She made it, Sophia. It was a close call, but she pulled through. She's a fighter, that one." The wave of relief that washed over Sophia was so overwhelming that she had to sink back into her chair. Tears of gratitude stung her eyes, and Chubby, picking up on the shift in energy, gave a soft, joyful bark, wagging his tail. Dr. Brown's expression turned serious again. "There's more," he said. "Detective Chen is here. They found the mother." Just as he finished speaking, Detective Chen appeared around the corner, walking beside a young girl who looked no older than 16. The girl's eyes were swollen from crying, and she twisted her hands together anxiously, her posture hunched with apprehension. Dr. Brown spoke softly as they approached. "Sophia, this is Lucy Matthews. She's baby Lucky's mother." Lucy lifted her head, her gaze full of fear and tentative hope. "Is she okay?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. I was so scared." Sophia's heart ached for the girl. Rising to her feet, she stepped forward and gently took Lucy's trembling hands in her own. "Your baby is going to be just fine," she said warmly. "She's incredibly strong, just like her mother." Lucy's composure crumbled, and she burst into tears. Sophia guided her to a chair and sat beside her, offering comfort and reassurance. Over the next hour, Lucy poured out her story, her words tumbling over each other in a rush of pent-up emotion. She explained how she had been a straight-A student, with aspirations of becoming a doctor, her future bright and full of promise. But one impulsive decision at a party had led to an unplanned pregnancy. Paralyzed by fear of disappointing her strict parents and jeopardizing her college dreams, Lucy had hidden the pregnancy. Alone and terrified, she had given birth in her bedroom, unsure of what to do next. "I panicked," Lucy sobbed, her voice raw with regret. "I wrapped her up and left her in the park. I thought someone would find her right away. I never meant for her to be in danger. The moment I got home, I realized how terrible my decision was. Ever since then, I've been trying to find the courage to come forward." Detective Chen, who had been silently listening, spoke up, her tone steady but compassionate. "Lucy turned herself in this afternoon. Given the circumstances and her willingness to cooperate, we're working with the district attorney to ensure she's treated fairly." Dr. Brown, who had remained quiet until now, stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Lucy," he began gently, "your baby was born with a condition called tetralogy of Fallot, with pulmonary atresia. It's a severe congenital heart defect. We've performed corrective surgery, and while she'll need ongoing care with proper treatment, she can grow up healthy and live a normal life." Lucy's face crumpled as she processed his words, shock and guilt mixed in her expression. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If I had known, I never would have left her. Can I see her? Please, I need to see her." Dr. Brown's stern expression softened. "She's in recovery now. I think it would be good for both of you to be together." As everyone prepared to escort Lucy to see her baby, Sophia felt a gentle tug on her sleeve. Turning, she saw Detective Chen standing beside her, a faint smile playing on her lips. "There's one more thing," the detective said, pulling out a tablet. "We found security footage from the park. You might want to see this." Chen pressed play, and the video began. It showed Chubby sniffing around the park until he came upon the baby. What unfolded next took Sophia's breath away. The footage captured Chubby trying to get the attention of passers-by, but no one stopped to help. After several failed attempts, Chubby carefully picked up the bundle in his mouth and started his determined journey to find help. "He knew," Chen said softly, her voice tinged with admiration. "It's like he understood the baby needed more than just the next person who happened to walk by." Sophia dropped to her knees beside Chubby, wrapping her arms tightly around the old dog. "You incredible, brilliant boy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're not just a hero, you're a guardian angel." Over the following days, baby Lucky, now officially named Taylor Lucky Matthews, became the center of a whirlwind of love and activity. Lucy's parents, though initially overwhelmed with anger and shock, quickly set aside their emotions to surround their daughter and granddaughter with unconditional support. Social services collaborated closely with the family to ensure that Lucy and Taylor had everything they needed to thrive. Sophia, deeply moved by Taylor's situation, chose to step out of retirement to work part-time in the NICU. She wasn't alone. Chubby, the courageous dog, joined her as the hospital's newest therapy dog in training. Dr. Brown, inspired by Taylor's life-saving surgery and Sophia's steadfast commitment, decided to dedicate his career to pediatric cardiology, aiming to transform the lives of children like Taylor. Meanwhile, Chubby's heroic act had become the talk of the city, sparking a flood of donations for his care. Sophia, touched by his bravery, officially adopted him, giving the aging dog a home filled with love and warmth. A month later, on a bright sunny afternoon, Sophia found herself seated on a bench in Oakbrook Community Park. Chubby lay comfortably at her feet while she gently held little Taylor in her arms. The baby, now thriving and cheerful, babbled contentedly. Lucy sat beside her, her face radiating joy as she played with Taylor, tickling her tiny feet. "I never imagined I'd return to this place," Lucy said softly, her gaze drifting across the park. "But now, It feels like the start of something beautiful, not the end of something painful. Sophia smiled as a delicate butterfly landed momentarily on Chubby's nose, causing him to sneeze. "Life has a way of offering second chances," she replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes we just need someone to guide us." As if he understood her sentiment, Chubby raised his head, his deep brown eyes locking with Sophia's. In that serene moment, surrounded by the new beginnings they had embraced, Sophia felt an overwhelming sense of purpose and gratitude. The park, which once marked a turning point in their lives, now symbolized hope and fresh starts. It stood as a reminder that even in life's darkest hours, a small act of kindness or a paw can change everything. As Taylor giggled and reached out to stroke Chubby's fur, Sophia knew this wasn't the conclusion of their story, but the dawn of a new chapter. Their remarkable journey, filled with love and resilience, was only just beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our next furry tale now on screen.